Welcome to Mind of an Editor. I'm Bullet Rebel, also known as the most inactive editor of all time. Those who have known me since the Halo days already know what to expect from this video, but for the new people, I'll briefly explain what this series is about. Mind of an Editor is a commentary series I used to do where I explain every little detail of an edit and its meaning. As opposed to a VFX breakdown where I show you various effects and how they're all layered, Mind of an Editor seeks to shed light on the metaphors and symbolism I integrate in certain videos. I'm essentially explaining why certain things happen instead of how. Today, we will delve deeper into the edits named The Seventh Dream and The Fourth Nightmare. Before you watch this any further, I heavily encourage you to pause the video and watch both edits beforehand. All caught up? Good. Let's get right into it. The Seventh Dream was a fun edit to make. After having done story edits for such a long time, I needed to break the cycle and make something completely different. The 7 is there because this was my 6th main edit, and the 7th edit would be my dream. Ironically, the 7th dream is the edit named The Fourth Nightmare. It's also a dream as opposed to a nightmare because the core of this edit is my hope of finally overcoming some editing hurdles, which I'll explain in a bit. Before I get ahead of myself, I should provide more context to the edit. I've been making cinematic story edits ever since the Visitor crashed into the Fortnite island. Unfortunately, history has repeated itself on my channel. Just like how I grew tired of the allegory of the void from Halo, these story edits were about to cause another editing burnout. I enjoyed them at first because I love integrating stories into my videos, but as time went on, I kept trying to one-up the previous story edits in terms of quality and action. It turned into a stressful train wreck very fast. I had to constantly keep up with Fortnite events, skins, emotes, get people to help body act, release the videos shortly after events so the videos would get more views. My channel quickly became a full-time job, yet I didn't make a single dollar from it. In fact, with all the skins and emotes I had to buy for the video, all I could do was lose money. I needed a break. I needed something new. And that is The Seventh Dream. Since I've been making cinematic edits for so long, my style is camera work based. I rely very little on effects. Since they were cinematic, I would always use the same type of songs as well. However, The Dream focused more on effects and used a very different song. I went out of my way to use one I'm uncomfortable with to force me to edit differently. Additionally, I wanted to make this edit entirely in creative mode. It felt great because it brought me back to the old Halo days where I would spend weeks in Forge making custom maps just for my edits. Creative mode is an untapped goldmine for Fortnite edits. I haven't seen anyone make a creative mode edit yet, and no one I know of has used it aside from thumbnails or memes. The most editors have done is get clips in Playground and maybe some cinematics in Creative just for the green screen. Creative is amazing because you're in complete control. You get to create the setting, the action, the characters, everything, just the way you want it. The extra creative settings like fog and chromas help enhance the edits as well, which is something you can't get in Playground. That being said, The Seventh Dream was an ambitious first step into the creative world, a stepping stone for The Fourth Nightmare. It was an edit where I could cut loose and experiment to my heart's desire like I used to do every now and then. I didn't have to worry about what skins and emotes I had, I didn't have to spend days planning any script, I just edited what I felt like doing at that time. Since it was my first time experimenting with creative, I wanted to recreate the void of the allegory from my Halo series, but make it a bit more colorful. Interestingly, the red hazy environment throughout the edit was created by accident. One day I saw a screenshot from an editor on Twitter and I liked the background, so I tried recreating it to practice with some effects. It's something I often do, where I see a cool effect from another editor and try to recreate it without knowing how they did it. This forces me to think differently about how to use various layers, plugins, and compositing techniques to achieve an effect. I don't straight up copy it, but I use what I learned from recreating it for other things. In this case, the end result looks nothing like the original image, even though I was inspired by it. The red color was a random choice, I just felt that it looked good. I used a lot of turbulent displace and glitching throughout the edit because I felt that it fit the song and the theme. I did the same in The Fourth Nightmare because I wanted it to be consistent with The Seventh Dream. The featured skin in this edit is Nara, who in a way became my persona. It's a skin I frequently use, and she also represents something important to me in The Seventh Dream. The effects themselves have no meaning, I only did them because, for once, I wanted to do something cool. In fact, there's almost no symbolism to explain in this edit. There's a lot more to explain in the Fourth Nightmare though. However, the reason I used Drift and Enforcer is because of videos in which they're featured. Enforcer is my biggest video ever, sitting at around 180k views. Drift is at, I think, 70 or so. Although I'm incredibly happy these videos did well, they have been lurking in the back of my mind ever since they got popular. I fell back into my obsession with numbers and the performance of my content, hoping that the rest of my videos would do just as well. Of course that would never happen because they're both viral videos. This is why I kill them both in the 7th Dream. It symbolizes me not really surpassing the views, but just getting over it. Drift and Enforcer are in the past. Sure, the edits performed well, but I should stop worrying about it and focus on what I enjoy again. Enforcer was my best video, which is why I kept forcing myself to make story edits even though it got to the point where I hated doing them. I kept telling myself they'd be popular again. I realized I had lost my passion for making story edits, so I simply stopped everything. I already had Ruin planned at the same time as the 7th Dream, so I at least decided to finish that one. Like I said, there isn't much to the 7th Dream. It was mainly an edit for me to go all out and enjoy myself for once. Now, we dive into the much edgier edit. The Fourth Nightmare. For every dream, a nightmare. As I mentioned before, the 7th Dream was merely a stepping stone. I dipped my toes in the waters of potential and realized I could make something even greater, something more personal, like I've done in the past. I have been planning on taking an indefinite break from editing to focus on other things in life, but there was no way the 7th Dream would be my last edit. I didn't want to end my Fortnite journey on a small 40-second edit that was mainly experimenting with creative mode. I wanted to recapture the old days where I would spend months doodling in my books, coming up with effect ideas, storyboards, and more personal stories to tell. For those who knew about the allegory from Halo, you'll know that it was a very personal and emotional series to me. I didn't want to simply tell the same story elements from Halo again, but the core of the Fourth Nightmare is still about myself. Unlike the number in the 7th Dream, the number in the Fourth Nightmare holds much more weight. In this edit, I decided to share 4 of my fears, or what I call nightmares. I'll explain each one in order. The first is the weight of an insurmountable past. As I mentioned previously, Enforcer and Drift are 2 of my most important videos. My fear related to this is that I will never surpass those 2 edits in popularity, nor will I ever be able to relive the older days when Fortnite was incredibly popular on YouTube, thanks to the Replay Royale contest, hence why it is an insurmountable past. It's crushing to know I've once been able to reach that peak, only to never reach it again. I have been unable to shake off the weight of the popularity of those 2 edits for a long time, and I feel it's been holding back my editing skills and passion. It sets expectations of future edits too high in terms of performance and views. It also locked in my type of content, since I would only make story edits or filler edits that would follow the hype, such as Scourge or Parabellum. Even the story edits themselves were only made to chase trends. Instead of making a unique story, I would force my videos to be centered on relevant skins or events just to get more views. I felt obligated to make more of the same, even if I stopped enjoying it, just to try and reach that peak once again. This fear was symbolized by the occasional quick appearance of Drift or Enforcer throughout the edit. I purposefully sprinkled them across the edit instead of giving them a dedicated part. I did this so they wouldn't have a physical presence in the forefront of the video, but they would lurk in the background, just like how they would always be in the back of my mind. The second is discovering a key to the unknown. The unknown is feared by many people. In my case, I've always feared for the future of my channel. I can't imagine myself still making video game edits 10 years down the line, yet I can't get rid of the feeling that I have to keep making content. I often find myself in ruts where I make content for others before myself. I'm in the same situation as when I made Divergence, an old Halo edit of mine. Not only do I fear taking a step out from my comfort zone into the unknown, but I also fear not getting out of my next comfort zone after stepping out of the first. I recently did this when I started Fortnite. Switching over from Halo was a rather big leap since my channel was entirely centered around Halo for a long time. It was my step into the unknown. However, I simply turned Fortnite into my next comfort zone by making story edits, and I was stuck in another rut. I repeatedly made the same content without any effort to improve and challenge myself, but that changed with the 7th dream and the 4th nightmare. The 4th nightmare is supposed to be my last fortnight edit, but I don't want to lock myself behind an absolute statement like that. The dream and the nightmare are another step into the unknown, and hopefully I don't end up in another rut if ever I decide to continue. One thing I certainly know is I will be taking a break. As much as I love what I do, YouTube has been a hobby that has slowly consumed me, an unhealthy addiction. I don't want to look back at my life a decade from now and realize I could have been doing so much more with my time. In the short term, I want to take a break and focus on my studies, learn new things, maybe discover other hobbies. In the long term, I don't know. I might stream other games for fun just to show I'm still alive. Maybe I'll even do editing streams again to show my editing process and connect with everyone else. Anyways, I got a bit off track there. Let's get back to the nightmare. Discovering a key to the unknown. Imagine that a treasure chest represents one of many possibilities of a choice. I hinted at this in the beginning with the glowing chests at the foot of the pedestal. For example, one chest could represent editing a game other than Fortnite. Another chest could be to continue making story edits. A third could be to stay with Fortnite but change my type of content. You get the idea. Before you even open the chest, you need a key. The key to these chests is the skills and knowledge I gained throughout the years. And opening it reveals all the elements related to that choice made. If I open one chest, maybe the loot is less views but more enjoyment. If I open a different chest, maybe I get something better or worse. I could easily use the keys I have now to open a familiar chest. I could open the filler edit one or the story edit one and already know what I get from it. But I chose a different key. One that I had to reforge. Forgotten from the old Halo days. It did not open familiar chests. Rather, it opened none at all. Instead, this key opened a path to the unknown. And that's exactly what the 4th nightmare is about. I have no idea what to expect from an edit like this. I don't know how well it will perform, how people will react to it, or if all the time I spent editing was even worth it. I began this project about 5 months ago, soon after the 7th dream was complete. The key to this path is the Infinity Blade, and the elements of the unknown are the monsters. Nara fighting the monsters symbolizes me having to confront the unknown. The monsters represent the negative thoughts, worries, and consequences of making an edit that is radically different from what I typically make. Each one is a thought, such as, this video won't get many views, or what if it doesn't end up being as perfect as I thought it would be, or even if I want to take a break from editing, people are going to expect more from me after watching this. These thoughts are endless and overwhelming. Despite holding the key, Nara is stuck, fighting the monsters forever. The third is the endless hunger of perfection. Perfection is something for which we all strive. Achieving it sounds great, but the path to get there is a whole different story. During my story edit phase, I was constantly trying to outperform the previous one, hoping I land on the perfect video that would boost in popularity like Enforcer did. The definition of perfection varies between people, and between yourself in different time periods. Your opinions in the past definitely evolve as you grow older. I'm currently unable to figure out my own definition. For me, it has wavered between a video I'm passionate about and a video that simply performs well. For example, if the 4th nightmare is my greatest work yet but doesn't get any views, I might consider it as a failure and a waste of time, as opposed to disregarding its performance and appreciating the hard work put into it. On the other hand, imagine a generic Fortnite clickbaiter who doesn't care about what content they make as long as it gets views. Their success is through numbers instead of content. I call this an emotional perfection versus a technical perfection. I represent both types through Sandstorm, emotional being without the mask and technical with the mask. It is imperative to learn and practice on the journey to perfection, yet during that journey, your perception of it might change, thus prolonging the path. You might get caught in an endless cycle where you never reach your perfection. That is the 3rd nightmare, telling myself I've achieved perfection only to endlessly hunger for more. My fear is that the mask will overtake Sandstorm. The technical perfection will win. Of course, nothing is ever perfect. There's always room to improve. But you should also be satisfied with your work, regardless of the imperfections. I was almost never satisfied. I was blinded by the desire for views. Tunnel vision can be both helpful and dangerous. For me, it was the latter. The destination mattered more to me than the journey. After a week or so after releasing a video, I just stopped caring about it. I never gave myself the time to do so. I never had time to sit back and appreciate how well a video performed or understand why it failed. I was already working on the next story edit. However, I should have looked back. Had I done so sooner, I would have realized there's no reason to burn myself out on content that was both hated by myself and dwindling in popularity. In the end, my motivation to improve my skills snowballed into a mad chase for perfection I could never reach. The fourth is for everything to become nothing. This is the only nightmare that isn't anywhere in the edit, but rather after it. Simply put, the fourth nightmare is when the video ends. There are no credits, no cliffhanger, no sequel, just a fade to black. Nothing else. I mentioned earlier how I felt obligated to make content forever. What has been driving that mentality for years is what happens if I stop editing. For me to have been making content for almost 8 years, only to just end it all, is the darkest nightmare of all to me. It is an inevitable future I keep trying to push back. I fear everything becoming nothing because editing has been part of my life for such a long time that I don't know what I would do without it. I suppose the issue with my situation is that editing has always been nothing more than a hobby, not something I could transfer over into a career path, although it is practically a full-time job with how much time I spend doing it. Currently, I am a software engineering student at university. Editing for 8 years is a complete waste of time compared to what I could have been doing, such as learning a new programming language or gaining experience related to my career. Imagine I'm a kid who has been collecting rocks as a hobby. I would spend hours a day looking for rocks, finding a pretty one, and putting them on display in my room over the years, only to grow up and realize it's a waste of space. Sure, you could look back at it with pride as if it was an old childhood photo that brought back good memories. However, in the end, that rock collection hasn't served any purpose for my older self. It was a waste. And that is the fourth nightmare. Now that you know about the nightmares, I'll explain how the multiple parts of the edit relate to them. I already mentioned a few, so I'll skip to what I haven't mentioned. Part 1, the museum, could be considered the intro to this edit. I made sure to tease each nightmare in this part. The first nightmare is introduced with the paintings of Drift and Enforcer that are seen for a split second. The second nightmare with the treasure chest near the pedestal, as I said before. The third nightmare is in the floating mirror where you see Sandstorm. And the fourth one is represented by the countless blank paintings in the sky, which leads into my next point. The paintings and the mirrors. The art of a painting is unchanging. Once the Mona Lisa was painted, that was it. Nothing else was painted on years later, the artist didn't change the colors, nothing else was touched. The painting was complete, fixed in place. All it could do is remain as a relic of the past. A mirror, however, is ever-changing. It constantly reflects the present world around it, and its reflection can change in the future. Whenever you see a painting in the fourth nightmare, it is a visualization of the past. When you see a mirror, it is a visualization of the present or the future. The opening shot of this edit reveals a museum of familiar paintings, but two are missing: Drift and Enforcer. They aren't in the museum, but rather in a darker place, once again symbolizing how those videos have had a negative influence on me by lurking in my mind. This is the fear of the past. There's also a blank mirror in the void. Although it is a mirror, it's not reflecting anything in the void. This is the fear of the unknown. I should mention how the camera work in this part suggests a first-person view of Nara walking through the museum and approaching the mirror on the pedestal. She enters the icy area and looks up to see countless blank paintings. This is the fear of everything becoming nothing. There were many paintings of the past in the museum, but in the future there's nothing. Everything is but a blank canvas. There won't be any more paintings to look back upon. Next, Sandstorm, who represents the third fear, is introduced in the mirror, but I also added a skeleton to suggest it was eaten down to the bone. The endless hunger of perfection had consumed it. When Nara faces the mirror, her reflection is cloudy and uneven. It reflects her spirit, my spirit, wavering between remaining her true self and becoming the masked perfection, the one I fear. This second part varied the most during my storyboarding. I had plenty of ambitious ideas, but they weren't feasible due to the small amount of body actors I could get. Also, not everyone had the right skins or emotes I had in mind. So I settled with what you see now, even if I wish I could have done more. Nara stands in a pool facing a mirror. Drift appears in the reflection, just like how Nara did in the beginning. Drift is in the mirror as opposed to Enforcer because, although Enforcer had more views, Drift was more appealing. I saw myself more as him. Making short edits that don't require much thought, yet get many views, is more favorable than spending months burning myself out on a story edit. The mirror shatters, and an unmasked Sandstorm is revealed. She's at a higher position than Nara, who's in the pool. This is me looking up at perfection, aspiring to become what is in front of me. That desire is what lets perfection control me. Remember how I said the definition of perfection can change, thus prolonging your journey to it? My definition had changed in the pool after taking the time to reflect. And as such, Sandstorm snaps me away onto a different path, one much longer and different than before. The path to the unknown. The sword fight is the third part and one of my favorite parts to make. I knew making the fourth nightmare would be difficult because it was quite ambitious compared to my previous projects. However, being who I am, I decided to make it even harder on myself by setting challenges. For the sword fight, my challenge was to make it entirely in a single take. No camera cuts, no transitions. Just one long camera shot of all the action. For other editors, this might seem like nothing because you have keyframes and dolly cams for games like League of Legends and Call of Duty, but Fortnite doesn't have any of that. This entire sequence was done in free cam on a very old and broken controller. In one sitting, I spent about 7 hours repeatedly recording the same sequence until I got it just right. Even if I was doing this challenge, I still wanted to follow my own camera work rules, such as introducing a subject prior to an action, variation of camera angles, and the rule of thirds. This single take is still imperfect, but it's the best I could do on a controller before going insane. Once the sword fight sequence is over, it transitions into a painting of Nara. Just how the museum paintings were characters from past videos, this transition is to say that the chapter of Nara has come to an end. She now resides among the other characters I've retired and put on display in the museum. In this penultimate part of the edit I call the Golden Destruction, I also set a challenge for myself. This time, instead of making the usual clip edits entirely in third person, I have the first person view of the kill for every clip, and the cinematics work around that. I mentioned before how I cared more about the destination more than the journey. These clips symbolize that. Sandstorm is destroying the past so that the journey is erased, and perfection is all that remains. The skins used for this part were mostly random since not everyone had the ones I needed. However, that didn't matter much because the message stayed the same. I definitely wanted the visitor there though, just so that he could wave again. I thought it would be a neat little callback to the one who started this entire journey. In the end, fear wins. Sandstorm is all that remains. She's in the same spot as the mirror in part 1 to show that the technical perfection had won against Nara. It might be hard to notice, but engraved into the pedestal is the fourth nightmare. I did the same in the beginning with Bullet Rebel, which is found in the same spot. These have a double meaning. At first glance, Bullet Rebel is simply a watermark, and the fourth nightmare was my way of integrating the title into the edit, since I also challenged myself to not do the usual Bullet Rebel presents XYZ 2D text. The more symbolic meaning of this text is that in the beginning, Bullet Rebel indicates that the reflection of Nara and Sandstorm is me, and the fourth nightmare is embodied by Sandstorm, who is on the pedestal at the end. When the void falls silent, and the world fades to black, the story of the dream and the nightmare comes to an end. Thank you for listening.